Today we're going to talk about untangling social media in 4 charts. So let's dive right in here. I'm going to draw a chart here that many of you have probably seen before. And I'm going to call it the 80-20 chart. And basically what I'm going to do is just show you a classic long tail behavior that many of you have seen before. So on the x-axis, we're talking about the number of social posts, essentially plotted in descending order of performance. So imagine taking your best performing social post, putting it here, and then on the y-axis, you're plotting reach, or the effectiveness of those posts. And so as you go further out and you make more and more posts, you're going to see declining effectiveness and a pretty precipitous drop-off if you're like most of our clients. And so the 80-20 rule comes into effect in a lot of places, also called the Pareto principle, if you've heard that before. Basically says in general that you get about 80% of your results from 20% of your effort. And in the world of social publishing, we definitely see that. And as a matter of fact, sometimes it's even more striking than that. Sometimes it's more like a 90-10 rule, where 10% of your posts generate 90% of your clicks and your impressions, especially if you have some real blockbuster viral posts that really take off. And so that's important because it really focuses you on the things that are mattering, sort of back up towards the head of that long tail. And we really want to dive in and focus on that area as the place where you're really delivering the most value. And many of our customers have thousands and even tens of thousands of posts. A couple of customers do 100,000 posts a month. So imagine if you were plotting 100,000 posts and the effectiveness of those posts, you'd see that kind of precipitous drop-off. That means 10, 20,000 of those 100,000 posts are really delivering the value. And you may not have anywhere near that number of posts, but it still applies. Even if you have a couple of dozen posts or hundreds or a few hundred posts, same principle applies. So that's the 80-20 chart. And we'll move on to the next one here, which is a pie chart that we're going to call the 95-5 chart. And so the reason we're going to call it the 95-5 chart is because 95% of your impressions come in feed. So when you put a story out to Facebook or Twitter, the 95% of the impressions in the feed are going to be compared to 5% that come from actual clicks or taps if it's on a mobile device. And that ends up being really important, especially in a world of, say, instant articles, where you're really focused on the monetization of those clicks back to your site, or in the case of an instant article, not to your site, but you're monetizing in a different way. That's really important because instant articles are hugely important from a user experience standpoint. It's a little bit like dial-up versus broadband. Instant articles are to mobile what broadband was to the internet experience. And I don't know about you, but what side of history do you want to be on? Do you want to be on the dial-up side or the broadband side? So instant articles or Google AMP or any other way of accelerating the user experience and really focusing people on quicker response is going to be hugely important. But from a monetization standpoint, if that's the only place where you can make money, that 5%, there's a real missed opportunity. So that's our 95-5 chart. Let's move on over here now, and we're going to draw what we call the Sawtooth chart. And this is going to look, like you might expect, like a sawtooth. And so what we're showing here is, imagine the day of the month. So you're plotting 30, 31 days over the course of a month. And then this is the number of social posts that you actually put out. And what we see is this is consistent across most of our clients, that you get these troughs on weekends, because most professional staff work Monday through Friday, normal hours, or at least a normal weekday schedule. They take off on the weekends, and so there's a lot less activity. The problem with that is that means the peak posts happen Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday typically. Wednesday and Thursday tend to be the greatest peaks. Friday starts to taper off as I guess people get in the weekend mindset. There's a huge opportunity built in here right now because these troughs are not accompanied by a corresponding trough in user attention. Users are still connected on weekends. They're still consuming social content on their mobile devices. We live in a very mobile society where people are consuming information 24/7. So if you're just posting or just heavily posting Monday through Friday and then sort of letting Saturday and Sunday go, or putting them on autopilot with a lot less content, you're really missing an opportunity, because at the end of the day, all of us are dealing with a world where there's too much information competing for a finite amount of consumer attention. So that's the Sawtooth chart. And let's move on to the fourth one here, which we're going to call our leverage chart. And this one is going to be the simplest and most basic, because it's just a straight line at a 45-degree angle here. So along the x-axis, we're talking about native revenue, or your branded content campaigns. So we're on the revenue generating side of things. If you run native campaigns, this is the revenue, and of course you're going to want that to go up. But of course, as your revenue goes up with the native, your cost, which is the y-axis, are going to go up as well. And so the whole idea is what's the slope of this line, and how do we really focus on your native and your branded content campaigns, and ultimately making those effective as they can be for your brand. So that's the 4 charts, but I'm going to dive in. You're like, okay, well, so what? How do I use this information? And so I'm going to go back through, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you actually use this information and some practical ideas and thoughts for you. So on our 80-20 chart here, I'm just going to highlight, these are the areas that really matter right in here. So I've just picked sort of an arbitrary guess on my handwriting here about where the 20% mark is. Maybe it's 15%, maybe it's 20 or 22%. That may vary. But this is your most coveted traffic. That's your very best content. And that's what is very valuable to advertisers, to consumers. I mean, you're creating huge amounts of high quality content, and the best of the best is hugely valuable. But my guess is you're probably not monetizing that on social right now, because there's no real clear path to doing it. The way social has developed and evolved does not encourage you to take your high performing organic content and monetize it. We at SocialFlow work with media companies, large and small, to really focus on how you monetize that high performing organic content. And that's going to come in play when we go back and talk about the slope of that native line as well, because it's a great way to supplement native campaigns to really focus on monetizing your organic social content that performs really, really well. So that's a practical piece of advice there, is really monetize your best performing organic inventory that you're posting out to social channels. Now onto the 95-5 thing. Here it's pretty simple and straightforward, which is don't concede the 95% of impressions, where almost all of the activity is occurring. Don't just concede that and concede those impressions and say that there's no way to monetize them. And again, that ties back to what we were talking about there. A lot of people are focused on instant articles. Again, as I've said, instant articles are a great consumer enhancement. They deliver a much better experience. Less great from a monetization standpoint for you. And so what we have to focus on is, how do you take instant articles and that 5%, that's a great solution, but then how do you really focus on the 95% and monetizing that? So again, don't concede that 95% of impressions, and that's our practical takeaway on the 95-5 chart. On to the Sawtooth. This one is maybe pretty intuitive here, which is, okay, let's take these troughs, I'll just pick 2 right here, and publish more in them, and maybe publish a little bit less proportionally if you have to shift content. We live in a world where you can't just magically go create more content. That takes more people, it's more expensive. Your staff is probably already tapped out, so I'm not suggesting you just increase your quantity, although that may be a perfectly fine strategy as well. I'm suggesting you redeploy your content and rely on tools and technology like what we do at SocialFlow to be able to better and more effectively post content on the weekends when it's got a better chance of getting more clicks, more engagement, more interaction, simply because it's competing with less other content in people's feeds. It's just quite simply moving your attention to where there's less competition. So put more on the weekends, and that's the practical takeaway for the Sawtooth graph. Lastly, on the leverage here, what do we want to do with this? Well, optically, what we want to do is we want to take the slope of this line, which I referred to before. If you can take this down, that's where you get your happy face, right? You want the slope of this line to be down so that as your revenues increase, your costs increase. They're bound to increase some, but you don't want them to increase much at all. And the lower you can get this line, the greater leverage you have. And so again, on your branded content campaigns, it's really time-consuming and expensive to create high-quality branded content for your advertising partners. It's a great business, and it's important. It's what advertisers want, but what you really want to be able to do is supplement that custom-created content with your high-performing editorial that we were talking about over in chart 1. And so if you do that, then what that'll do is pragmatically it'll take the slope of that line down, give you a lot better leverage, and give you a better outcome while delivering great content, great custom-branded content or native content to your advertisers, and while giving them the ability to sponsor the best of the best content that your editorial teams are already creating. It's really an unbeatable combination. So those are our 4 charts, and we hope you've enjoyed us in untangling social media in 4 charts. We'd love to talk to you further, and so I invite you, if you would like to continue the conversation and learn more, just contact us at sales@socialflow.com. Thanks very much.